Some footballers are naturally aggressive, but that doesn't mean you should mess with them. Virgil van Dijk isn't as hot-headed as Pepe or Ramos, but the players who dared to fight him regretted their actions. Who were these players though? The first on our list is Lisandro Martinez. Back in September when Liverpool trashed Manchester United 3-0 at Old Trafford, we saw Van Dijk and Licha involved in a heated exchange in the first half. Martinez had just committed a clear foul on Dominic Szoboszlai and even got a yellow card from referee Anthony Taylor. Szoboszlai was visibly hurt and was writhing on the ground in pain. As expected, Van Dijk wasn't pleased with Martinez's actions. As the Liverpool captain, he took it upon himself to make his feelings clear to the Argentine. Not exactly willing to back down, Martinez stepped forward, and they both exchanged words. We could hear Van Dijk challenging Martinez and saying, "Come and do this to me." Anthony Taylor eventually calmed the situation, but thinking about the situation, 5'9" Martinez certainly wouldn't have been the favorite against the 6'5" Van Dijk if both players were to lock horns. But being the smaller man doesn't mean anything though, because back in the fall of 2022, Bernardo Silva was ready to detonate on everyone, including Van Dijk. So Man City was up against Liverpool, and City midfielder Bernardo Silva decided he couldn't wait until full time to exchange jerseys with Mo Salah. So he got in a tussle with Salah in the second half, intentionally tugging on his jersey and almost tearing it into pieces. Jurgen Klopp saw the situation play out from the touchline and was really pissed. He tried protesting and got in the face of the assistant referee. Klopp got sent off for his actions, but Silva continued to exchange words with Salah and even pushed him when they got close. Van Dijk and Fabio Carvalho stepped in to defuse the situation, but Silva shoved Van Dijk and was ready to have a go at him before Haaland showed up as a peacekeeper. Liverpool won the match 1-0, but the fans were pissed off at the fact that Silva wasn't reprimanded for his actions. A fan then added that seeing the Portuguese push Van Dijk was the funniest thing he ever saw because, really, he has no chance against the Dutchman anywhere outside the pitch. Good thing Van Dijk remained classy, but revenge was on the menu against this next player. When the Netherlands faced Argentina in the quarterfinal of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, it was absolutely chaotic. Mayhem to say the least. With tensions rising faster than mercury in a heat wave, there were 16 yellow cards and a sending off. Van Dijk himself was involved in one major flashpoint. We saw him push Leandro Paredes to the ground after the PSG midfielder fired a loose ball into the Dutch dugout. We could see Paredes crumble to the ground like a deck of cards here, and it tells you just how much strength Van Dijk has in him. It was definitely one of the few moments you'll ever see the Dutchman visibly pissed off. After the incident, he said it was something he normally wouldn't do, but the heat of the moment got to him. But he definitely passed the message across, didn't he? Paredes will probably think twice about doing something like that if he ever finds himself up against Van Dijk. And we could say the same for Socrates because he definitely wanted no smoke from the Dutchman when they had a face-off. In December 2018, Arsenal got whooped 5-1 by Liverpool at Anfield. Socrates was adjudged to foul Mo Salah for a first-half penalty. Salah converted to put the Reds into a 4-1 lead, but Socrates was pissed off because he felt it was a dive by the Liverpool forward after what looked like minimal contact between the two players. So as both sets of them headed down the tunnel at halftime, Socrates continued to bother Salah with heated remarks. Van Dijk was taking notes and swiftly jumped to Salah's rescue. At the end of the day, Van Dijk needed to be held off by other players and the police. Van Dijk explained that he wasn't fighting and that he only wanted to have a word with Socrates. He then said, "I'm protecting my teammates, and that's normal. That's how everyone should react, and that's what we all need to do, to back each other. That's what I definitely do." Imagine having a teammate who's always the first to step in and defend you in any situation. It must feel good, right? But I'll tell you this, it certainly doesn't feel great when you're trying to wrestle the ball away from Van Dijk. One time, Correa tried to run into Van Dijk, but was given a body check by the Dutchman. But it wasn't enough. After Van Dijk passed the ball to the goalkeeper, he turned around to confront the Argentine because he felt like he was doing too much. Correa certainly felt the impact of the collision, but to his credit, he didn't just roll over and play dead. He handled the situation like a man. But perhaps the bravest of them all might have been Richarlison. There was no shortage of drama in the Merseyside derby between Liverpool and Everton in December 2018. Richarlison, still playing for Everton at the time, tried to use some time-wasting tactics as the Toffees struggled to keep the game level at 0-0. However, Van Dijk was having none of it. They both squared up and exchanged some words for almost 5 minutes before they were eventually separated. Liverpool ended up winning the match 1-0, but that didn't stop Richarlison from reflecting on how he almost came to blows with the Reds defender. Speaking to Globo Esporte, Richarlison explained that he would never back down from a fight and said these words to Van Dijk in Portuguese: "Who do you think you are?" Probably not the smartest thing to do because, according to former Liverpool defender Steve Nicol, Virgil van Dijk could beat anybody up physically. Those words were in response to claims from Michael Ballack that Van Dijk was lucky to have avoided the era of Didier Drogba, Alan Shearer, and co. Do you think so? When Liverpool faced PSG in the Champions League in December 2018, Neymar, who was still on top of his game at the time, felt that it was a good idea to square up against Van Dijk. Good thing there was a sea of players to separate both of them, because it probably wouldn't have ended well for Neymar. But it's football, sometimes your emotions are all over the place, and what happens on the pitch should remain there. Many fans think that Virgil van Dijk looks like the person who you have to really piss off to get him to actually punch you, and really, it's hard to disagree. Van Dijk seems to have a lot of restraint even when angry, but when pissed off, he literally doesn't care who you are. You're gonna feel the heat. Not many players fancy having a go at Cristiano Ronaldo just because of the aura he brings, but back in 2021, Van Dijk had a reason to. Remember we said the Dutchman is that big brother who will always show up for his teammates when they get bullied? Cristiano was fortunate to still be on the pitch for the second half of Manchester United's pathetic 5-0 defeat against Liverpool years back. The Portuguese forward was visibly frustrated that his side was down 3-0 in first half stoppage time, so he aggressively kicked the ball a number of times while the ball was nestled in Curtis Jones's midsection. It was indeed an aggressive play from CR7. Jones's teammates immediately marched over to the crime scene, with Andy Robertson being the first, but then came the towering Virgil van Dijk, who wasted no time and chested Ronaldo away. Cristiano would have fancied himself against Robertson, but we can't say for sure if he would have felt as confident against Van Dijk. Luckily, it didn't come to that. Ronaldo's compatriot Bruno Fernandes stepped in and somehow managed to separate them, but Ibrahima Konate also needed his presence to be felt, so he pushed Fernandes back. Anyway, many fans believe that CR7 deserved to be sent off there, but the ref didn't think so. At the end of the day, only 3 things are constant in life: death, taxes, and Virgil van Dijk standing up for his teammates. And anyone who dares to fight him probably wouldn't have fond memories because he's gonna bring the smoke if he needs to. How good a defender do you think Van Dijk is? And how does he compare to some of the all-time greats?